I was screaming her name into the forest, but all I heard was barking. Then silence. The trees swallowed my voice like the mist swallows light. I tore through the underbrush, branches slicing at my face, but I didn't care. My boots pounded the damp forest floor. Somewhere ahead, the bark of a dog rang out, sharp, urgent, echoing between the trunks. Shadow. He was still out there. My heart was thudding so loud I couldn't hear my own thoughts. "Emily!" I shouted again, my throat raw. "Emily, please!" No answer. Just wind, just trees, just the crackling crunch of dried leaves under Shadow's pacing paws. I reached the edge of a clearing and saw him, his tiny frame locked still, tail stiff, ears pinned back. He stood like a soldier at attention, facing the darkness that oozed between the trees like oil. He didn't move when I called. He didn't even blink. I stumbled toward him, expecting him to turn, but he only growled, a low, trembling sound that rumbled from his chest. I crouched beside him and reached for his collar. That's when I saw it. His eyes. He wasn't growling at me. He was warning something else. He just stared into the dark. And, for the first time, I swear I saw real fear in his eyes. That night haunted me. But the truth is, it didn't start there. Things like this never do. They sneak up slowly, until the line between memory and nightmare smudges like chalk in the rain. Before the forest, before the silence, before the missing girl and the growling puppy, there were just the two of us. It had been a year since I moved us here, to the edge of this sleepy town, cradled by woods and whispers. Emily needed the air. I needed the quiet. After the accident, everything in the city felt like noise. She stopped talking for a while. I stopped sleeping. The house was old but kind. It creaked in the wind and smelled like cedar. Mornings were slow, with pancakes and clumsy hugs. We built routines like nests, soft, safe, something to come back to. Emily, at 6, was already too intuitive. She didn't ask questions about her mother. She just held my hand a little tighter when it rained. She was always drawn to animals. Birds that didn't fly away from her. A fox that came to the porch for scraps. Sometimes I swore she spoke to them, and they answered in their own way. That's why I shouldn't have been surprised when she was the first to hear the crying. It was a late afternoon in early spring. We were walking one of our usual trails, mud still clinging to the thawing ground, the trees just starting to bud. Emily stopped mid-step. "Do you hear that?" I didn't at first, but then a faint, desperate whimper, like something hurt. She veered off the path, pushing through branches as if they weren't even there. I called after her, but she just kept moving, like she was following a thread only she could see. I jogged to catch up and found her kneeling by a tree, and that's when I saw him. A puppy. German shepherd, maybe 3 or 4 months old. Thin to the bone, his ribs sharp under dull fur. His paws were raw, and a length of rope bit into his neck, tethering him to a gnarled root. He didn't bark, didn't flinch, just stared. "Who would do this?" I muttered, stepping closer. Emily didn't answer. She reached out slowly, gently. The puppy licked her hand. "There's no one around," I said, scanning the woods. "No collar, no tag. This could be some kind of trap." Emily looked up at me. Her eyes were already wet. "He's scared." "I know, honey. But he chose me," she said simply. I don't know why those words cracked something open in my chest. Maybe because I saw the same fear in that dog's eyes that I saw in my own at night. I didn't argue again. We brought him home, bathed him, fed him. Emily named him Shadow because he followed her everywhere. Silent, constant, like he belonged to her. For the first few days, he was quiet. But then the nights came. It started with growling. Low, steady, like he was warning something only he could see. He would stand at corners, staring into shadowed spaces, hackles up. Once, he clawed at the floorboards under Emily's bed so hard, He bloodied his paws. I tried to tell myself he was just adjusting. He was a puppy, after all. He'd been through something awful. It made sense. But then Emily started talking in her sleep. "They're in the trees," she whispered once. Other times she'd sit up and say things like, "He only acts like that when the Whisper Man comes." I asked her what she meant. She just shrugged and petted Shadow's ears. I started locking the doors tighter at night, leaving lights on, sleeping with one ear tuned to every creak. And still, it got worse. One night I was half asleep on the couch when I heard a thump. Not like a branch or a raccoon on the roof. No, this was deliberate, heavy, like someone walking just outside. I bolted upright. Shadow was already at the door, barking like I'd never heard him bark before. Wild, frantic. His nails scratched frantically against the wood. Emily appeared. In the hallway, her nightgown glowing in the faint light. She didn't look scared, just hollow. She looked at me, then at Shadow, then whispered, "He's back." It started with the trees. I was walking the trail again, retracing the steps from that day we found Shadow. Something had been gnawing at me since the night Emily said, "He's back." Like a splinter under the skin of my thoughts. Tiny, irritating, impossible to ignore. The forest was quieter than usual. No birdsong, just the distant rustle of leaves and my own breath. Then I saw it, a symbol carved into the bark of a birch tree, about chest height. A jagged circle with a line. Through it, and 3 slashes like claws beneath. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't old either. I looked around. More marks, different shapes, appeared the deeper I went. Some looked like crude stick figures. Others were more intricate, almost ritualistic. Shadow wouldn't follow me past the first symbol. He whimpered and pulled back, tail between his legs. When I forced a few more steps, he barked, sharp, panicked. I gave up. I wasn't about to drag a terrified puppy deeper into whatever this was. Back home, I didn't mention the symbols to Emily. She'd been off lately, and I didn't want to add fuel to whatever strange fire was already burning in her mind. But that night, I found her at the kitchen table, coloring with her tongue between her teeth the way she always did when focused. "What are you drawing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She flipped the page toward me. I felt my stomach drop. It was a forest, but not a peaceful one. The trees were black, almost scribbled. Hanging from one of the limbs was a rope, frayed at the end, and beneath it stood a tall, faceless figure. Around him, a dozen smaller shadows. One had ears, pointed, familiar. "That's Shadow?" I asked. She nodded. "Who's the man?" She shrugged. "He whispers." I swallowed hard and tried not to let the tremble in my hands show. "Did you make this up?" She shook her head. "I see it in dreams." Later that night, I burned the drawing in the fireplace. I told myself it was just a child's imagination, but the crackle of the flames sounded too much like whispers to ignore. The next day, I drove into town. I needed answers. At the local library, tucked in a quiet corner beneath a sagging ceiling fan, I found dusty copies of the local paper going back 50 years. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just a feeling that I'd find something. It didn't take long. Dozens of small stories, scattered over decades. Local girl vanishes near Alder Trail. Boy found wandering woods, can't speak. Dog missing for days, returns, mutilated. Always the woods, always children, always silence. One article chilled me to the bone. Whispers in the Pines. Town legend or tragic truth. It talked about a local folk tale. An old story parents told to scare kids. Don't go into the woods at night, or the Whisper Man will find you. He calls to you from the dark. You'll hear your name in the wind. If you answer, he knows. If you follow, you don't come back the same. I pressed my fingers to the page and felt a pulse in my ears. The librarian, an older man with half-moon glasses, noticed my interest. He shuffled over. "You know," he said, voice soft, "some folks still leave salt at the trailheads, just in case." "In case of what?" He glanced toward the window, out to the trees. "Just in case." I couldn't shake the feeling that something more grounded, more real, had to be behind all this. My next stop was the vet. I'd noticed a scar on Shadow's back. I thought maybe it was from whoever tied him up, but when Dr. Patel ran her fingers over the skin, her brow furrowed. "This was surgical," she said. "Clean, intentional, and it looks like someone removed a chip." "A chip? Probably a tracking implant. Let me scan him anyway." She tried. Nothing registered. She ran a deeper scan and finally found a faint trace, like a ghost of a serial number. We looked it up. What came up chilled me more than any old legend. "Deactivated military asset. K9-112, the screen read. The file was thin, redacted in places, but the dates lined up. A military search and rescue dog had gone missing during a training op in the National Forest. 2 years ago. Never recovered." I stared at the grainy black and white photo on the file. It wasn't a perfect match, but the eyes were unmistakable. It was Shadow. Back home, I sat on the floor and looked at him. "Where did you go?" I whispered. He just looked back, calm and still, but something behind those eyes flickered, like memory, like warning. That night I noticed Emily hadn't come down for dinner. I knocked on her door and stepped in. She was curled in a corner, knees to her chest, muttering. I knelt. "Sweetheart?" She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "He's not supposed to find us here." My mouth went dry. "Who isn't?" "The Whisper Man," she said, "but he talks to me anyway." I hugged her tightly. She felt colder than she should have. Her skin pale, her hair damp with sweat, and her room smelled wrong, like dirt, damp earth, like a grave. The walls were covered in new drawings, eyes, trees, ropes, a black shape lurking behind a little girl and her dog. She didn't speak much after that, set up a baby monitor in her room that night, not because I thought she was in danger, but because I was afraid of not knowing if she was. I lay in bed, watching the feed. Hours passed. Shadow slept at her feet. Then, just after 3 a.m., he lifted, his head, ears perked. He growled, low. In the audio feed, something rustled, then static, then a voice, distorted. Not Emily's, not mine. "She's almost ready," it whispered. I sat bolt upright, heart hammering in my chest. Shadow stared directly at the monitor, and the screen went black. I couldn't sleep after the voice. Every noise in the house felt amplified. The creak of old floorboards, the ticking of the wall clock, the occasional whimper from Shadow. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee going cold, Emily's drawing spread out before me like evidence in a case I didn't understand. I kept coming back to the symbols, the repetition of trees, the way she drew ropes over and over again. Something about the carvings in the forest. It itched at the back of my brain. So I dug deeper. I started with the county archives, faded files, from the local government. Most of it was mundane. Property deeds, trail permits, flood zone reports. But then I found something strange. A restricted land use request filed in 1963, never approved, for a parcel of forest land about 5 miles from where we found Shadow. It was marked as a military testing site. I cross-referenced coordinates with old maps and found nothing, labeled. But the coordinates matched the woods behind our home. Online, things got darker. In dusty internet forums, buried beneath Bigfoot theories and Cold War conspiracies, I found whispers about something called Project Ashlight, a rumored U.S. government program. allegedly conducted in rural locations during the late 50s and 60s. Experimental cognitive bonding between children and highly trained animals, usually dogs. Some claimed the goal was early detection of threats through empathic resonance. Others believed it was something darker, harnessing psychic abilities, even supernatural ones. In one thread, an anonymous user posted, "The bonded ones were like antennae, sensitive to whatever was left behind. The dogs weren't just pets, they were shields." That word again, bonded. The implication was chilling. Something in that forest had never left. And maybe Shadow hadn't just found Emily. Maybe he'd chosen her. That night, the woods came alive. I was outside, flashlight in hand, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. Shadow paced the porch, uneasy. Then he froze. His body stiffened like a taut wire. A shape moved just beyond the edge of the trees. My flashlight flicked up and caught it. A figure, tall, shifting. Its limbs seemed too long, its head angled in a way that made my stomach twist. Shadow let out a snarl and bolted. I chased after him, heart hammering. The figure moved like fog, slipping between trees, always just out of reach. Shadow cornered it near an old oak, barking furiously. Then it turned toward me. Eyes, blank and wide, hollow like Emily's drawings, locked onto mine. I couldn't breathe. The air thickened. The forest pulsed, and then it was gone. Gone, like mist burned away by dawn. Shadow whined. He lowered his head and nudged my leg, urging me back. At home, I found Emily awake, standing at the window. "It wanted me," she said, not turning. "It's done waiting now." I didn't ask what it was. I was too afraid I'd believe her. The next day, Shadow led me somewhere new. He barked near a twisted tree with gnarled roots. Something about the way the earth dipped beneath it caught my eye. I brushed away dead leaves and debris. Beneath was a rusted hatch. I hesitated, then opened it. The stairs beneath creaked under my weight, the air inside stale and metallic. My flashlight beam caught peeling paint and rusted metal. I moved slowly, Shadow beside me, his ears perked. At the bottom, a corridor lined with doors. On one wall, black and white photos decaying from age. Children in hospital gowns. German shepherds at their sides. Some of the photos had names beneath. Emily wasn't one of them, but the familiarity of the dogs was chilling. Then I saw a metal cabinet. Inside, files. Most were illegible from mold, but one stood out. Crisp, recently touched. The label read, Echo 9, I opened it. It was Shadow, or who he had been. Echo 9 was described as hyper-responsive to empathic targets, strong bonding, displays aggressive, defense behaviors under duress. There were test logs, brain scans, military reports. Then, one last note, unit lost during containment breach, presumed feral. If recovered, do not separate from bonded host. Only bonded ones can banish it. Banishing. The word echoed in my head. At the end of the corridor stood a steel door. Symbols were etched around its frame. Some matched Emily's. Drawings. I reached out. The handle was warm. Then Emily screamed. I ran. She was in her bed, eyes wide, drenched in sweat. Her hands gripped the blankets like they were the only thing anchoring her to the world. "He has the tree now," she whispered. "He knows I'm his." Her breath hitched. "Don't let him take me." I hugged her, heart shattering. She felt weightless. "We'll run," I said without knowing if it was true. "We'll get out. I'll protect you." Shadow sat beside us, staring into the hallway, growling low. Downstairs the house groaned. The air shifted. From deep in, the bunker, I heard it. Clank. Then the sound of metal scraping. The steel door creaked open, by itself. We returned to the forest at dawn. The sky was a dull gray, casting long, sickly shadows through the trees. Fog coiled around our ankles, slithering like something alive. Even the birds were silent. The deeper we went, the more unnatural it felt, like walking into a dream you couldn't wake from. The air grew colder. Time seemed to stretch. Emily held my hand, her small fingers cold but steady. Shadow walked ahead, ears forward, low growl vibrating through his chest. We reached the tree, the one with the gnarled roots and the hidden hatch. But something was wrong. It was larger now, blackened, almost alive. The bark twisted in ways bark shouldn't twist, like it had bones underneath. And from the base, the shadows bled. Then it rose. A figure peeled itself from the tree, tall, thin, inhuman, like a mannequin carved from soot and sorrow. It moved like smoke and bone, head cocked too far to one side, fingers twitching. No face, just holes. I stepped in front of Emily. Shadow barked, furious, then lunged. He hit the thing mid-air and passed through it. The creature didn't flinch. Instead, it turned to me. I felt it, not just its presence, but its pull, like it was peeling, memories from me, layer by layer. I saw my wife's face, her last day, the accident, the guilt, how I buried the worst of it just to function, how I thought keeping Emily safe meant keeping everything locked away. But the creature fed on that, silence, that buried pain. It didn't need blood, it needed grief. It moved forward. I couldn't move. Emily cried out, "No!" The thing paused. She stepped past me barefoot, dirt on her cheeks, fearless. "You don't belong here," she said. "He is not yours." Shadow stood beside her, ears flat, tail still. His body began to shimmer, not bright but like moonlight on rippling water. Then I felt it too. A warmth, not from outside, from within, from them. Emily touched Shadow's head and the ground rumbled. A sound like wind through bones filled the clearing. The tree pulsed. The creature twisted, writhing like it was unraveling. Then, from Emily and Shadow both, a pulse, soundless, weightless, but final. The creature screamed. No, not aloud, but in every nerve of my body. It clawed at the air as cracks split open beneath it. The earth swallowed its limbs, then its chest, its head. Just before it vanished, it looked at me, or through me, and whispered, "One of you still remembers." Then it was gone. The light returned, slowly, like a sunrise after a storm. Leaves shimmered. Wind moved again. The forest exhaled. Shadow lowered his head and sighed. Emily leaned into me. "We're okay now," she whispered. I believed her. We never went back to the bunker. I sealed the hatch with rocks and dirt. Let the forest keep its secrets. At home, life shifted. Emily began to smile more, sleep through the night. Her drawings were still strange, but softer now, dreamlike, not nightmarish. Shadow stayed close, watchful, but no longer tense. Sometimes I caught him gazing out the window like he was listening for something far away. I slept again, too. Real sleep. For the first time in years. 1 month passed. Spring was blooming, sunlight breaking through the trees, birds returning. Emily and Shadow played in the yard. She giggled, chasing him in circles near the tree line. I was in her room later that evening, tidying up. Under her bed, I found a new drawing. It was our house, every detail perfect. But in the upstairs window, mine, there, was a shape. Small, faint. A face with hollow eyes watching from inside the wall. My breath caught. I turned to Emily. "Sweetie, when did you draw this?" She didn't look at me, just reached down and hugged Shadow, then whispered, "If he comes back, you'll help again, right?" Shadow didn't bark. He just stared into the wall. Silent. And I swear, I saw his tail twitch, not from fear, but readiness.